What is going on, guys? My name is Tim Ruswick, and today I wanted to talk about some level design philosophy. So, there's one thing I've been doing a whole lot over the last month. It's been level design. I've probably built at least 100 different levels for my game Phasmophobia over the past month, and I've cut about 75% of those levels because they're just not good enough. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the philosophy behind level design, because I think my philosophy has kind of evolved over time, and I think it's specific to each game, but I wanted to share with you guys one of the concepts that I'm using to help build my game, to maybe help you with your level design a little bit more. So when I started with Phasmophobia, it started out as like a generic platformer. Actually, the very first time I made the first build of Phasmophobia, I was like, okay, I want to make a game with 4 colors and simple shapes. What I came up with was a cube, a heart, a background, a foreground, a white cube, and a red heart. Those were the 4 colors. That was the basic game, and that's how I ended up with Phasmophobia. Now, obviously, it's evolved past that point. We changed the character, we changed the backgrounds, we added all kinds of different stuff. But the core of the game is still the same. But originally, with that simplistic type of thing that we had going on, I'll show you guys the screen that I'm working with. These are all the original levels that I have here on the right side of the screen. And if we look at some of these super simple levels, like these are like kind of ridiculous now. And some of these are, they're kind of broken because I've changed stuff since then that just, like this was the original level, right? Like these were the original levels, and they're generic. Like they're very generic, right? And they feel generic. They feel like a generic platformer. They don't feel like they're anything special. Like, okay, there's a black heart. Like I broke some of the stuff because like, these are older levels and they're not compatible with the new code, so they don't all work. But some of them, they're stupid. They're generic. So one of the things I've tried to do since I've revamped a lot of the stuff is I come up with a name for the level. And if you notice, all of the new levels have a name in their bottom right. So if we look at this one's called Break. And this is one we just did on the stream last night. One of the viewers of the stream came up with the name Break, because I asked people to, give a name that we can work from. And from that word, we inspired this whole level. So the word break I used as inspiration for this whole level, and I kind of took that as like a heartbreak. So if you notice, when you move around in this little middle space, you notice this heart is kind of broken in half at the top. And that kind of inspires this whole little interesting kind of thing where it's a cool, memorable level now. Because of that one word, because we started with that word. So like, had I not started with the word, for example, I think it would be less memorable and less complete. So this is something that I talked about a little bit about on stream, but this is a level that I can describe to somebody and they will understand what I mean. Those first levels that I showed you, the generic levels, I can't describe them to somebody. I can't say the level with the thing. They're too generic, right? So my level design philosophy on this is to have a level name and build the level around that name, around that theme, right? I have another level that I have planned out called Clockwork, and there is a clock planned out in the middle with enemies for the arms. So stuff like that, inspired by an actual name, I think really helps me hone my creativity and make something super, super unique. Let me see if I can find another example of this for you guys. So this one's called Pathfinder. And this is one I made to kind of show off these little heart enemies. So you start out here on the bottom. I'll go this way so you can see. But you see these enemies kind of come at you from all different sides. and they don't get revealed until a little bit later, but you got to kind of find the path. And this is similar to a couple different things that I've made. It's unique yet different, and Pathfinder, I think, is a good fitting name for this. Another example of a name that's really inspired a level, which made it really interesting. This one's called the Labyrinth. And I won't show you too much, but basically you can guess what it is. It's a labyrinth. There are ways that go every single which way, and you have no idea where to go. And there are these little hearts that block your path once you go through them. So you can kind of like mess yourself over. Like there's so many different ways to go in this game, in this level. I'll try and stick to where my head's not in the way so you guys can see, but you can go up. Like, so this level was heavily inspired by the name, the Labyrinth. And I just find for me that the philosophy of designing behind a name really, really, really helps out. It really, really, really helps out. And it's made me be more creative. It's made my levels, I think, be more memorable. And I think it gives design and purpose and meaning to each one of the levels that I design, rather than before it was like, you know, Q1 002, Q1 003 or whatever. I feel like the levels were generic because the name was generic. And so one of my design philosophies is seriously to start with a name. Sometimes I start with a level and I name it afterwards, but I feel like the levels always come out better when I name it first and I build around that inspiration. And a lot of these levels are designed with an underlying tone, an underlying meaning, because the game is broken into sections that represent certain emotions. And so a lot of the level names in the first quarter of the game, for example, represent a certain emotion. And all of the words that I use for the titles fall in line with that emotion. So I think it makes designing levels a lot simpler for me. I think it makes it a lot more effective. And I think a good measure of this is a player should always be able to describe a level to someone else, and someone else should be able to know what they're talking about. If your game has levels that are generic enough where if someone is describing a level and there's a ton of different levels that match that description, or you can't accurately describe a level to someone, I think some of the levels are a little bit too generic. I think they need to be more unique. And I've really honed down on that design philosophy. I've really taken that to heart with Philophobia for sure. And I've even gone the step further of like actually naming it, designing levels with names. I even decided to put the name on the actual level so that people can see it and kind of use it as like a hint in a way. Some of the level names are hints on how to complete them. Like the Labyrinth, when you load into Labyrinth and you see the word the Labyrinth, you know you're in for a maze. You just know how that's how it works. So it's definitely helped me in my design philosophy. It's definitely helped me kind of build stuff that I think is good and really great, not just average stuff. And a lot of the stuff I end up cutting is the generic stuff that I feel like it's you and there's a bunch of barriers in between you and the door, and then they want to kill you and you want to get to the door. I just think that's too generic. So I always try and have some kind of philosophy beyond just get to the door and don't let shit kill you. Some kind of meaning to the levels beyond that stuff. And I get maybe it doesn't fit in every game. Like if you've got an FPS game that's heavy on story, like obviously you got to have this location and that location, like progress the story. But I think starting with the emotions and starting with what the purpose of the level is, even if you don't start with a name, I think naming is pretty important though, for me, because it definitely helps kind of hone in that theme, especially for 2D levels. 3D levels, you know, if they're like big complexes or something, it might be a little bit different. But starting with some kind of emotion or some kind of theme, I think is really important, and it's definitely helped me. So if you've got any level suggestions, level design suggestions, leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear from you guys. I know a lot of you guys are designers and level designers yourselves, so I'm always open to learning. If you got any questions on this, please leave them below in the comments. But once again, my name is Tim Ruswick, and I will see you tomorrow.